Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and today we're going to be taking a look at a ultra budget power supply from Aerocool. This is the Cylon 500w. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so this is the Aerocool Cylon 500w power supply. It's an 80+ rated power supply. It only gets the 80+ white rating, not the bronze, unfortunately. I think a lot of this is to do with the differences between the EU power ratings and the US power ratings. If you go over to the 80+ rating site, you can check out all the information there. But this is around about 2 or 3% away from getting a bronze award. So it's by no means a rubbish power supply, and certainly for less than £30, which is what I picked it up for here in the UK from Amazon.co.uk. I think this is a fantastic option for those of you building budget systems, maybe with an A520 or possibly rebuilding an older system. This definitely ticks the box, especially at the moment in COVID times where power supply prices seem to be going through the roof. An equivalent power supply to this from someone like Corsair, where obviously you're paying for a little bit of branding and also warranty, you can pay almost double for some of the CX range. So this, for some people on an extreme budget, is going to tick a lot of boxes. So let's take a look at the packaging, take a look at the power supply, go through some of the details, specs, connections, etc. And then, well, you can tell me what you think of it in the comment section. So starting off with the packaging, on the front here you can see it's pretty much standard deal. So it's Aerocool Cylon 500w, 80+ white rated with active PFC. Now active PFC is something you definitely want to go for in a power supply. If you don't have active PFC, I would essentially look somewhere else. On the sides of the box we've got various specifications in different languages for those EU countries. And on the back it goes into a little bit more detail about the individual features. So it's the Cylon 500w, as we've seen before, 80+ white rated. That is for the 230 volt range EU. Yeah, the 80+ rating thing is a little bit of a mystery, but if you want to check it out more, I'll put some links in the video description so you can check out what 80+ ratings mean and what the tolerances are between the different levels. So it goes on to discuss the soft black flat cables, which are really nice if you're doing a open-sided build or some sort of tempered glass build where you can see inside. No ketchup and mustard on this one, which is really nice, and it's got really nice soft cables, so easy to cable manage. As it says there, it's got up to 85% efficiency. Again, that is down to more the EU power requirements rather than the US ones, so do take that with a grain of salt. Optimized thermal fan with speed control. So essentially it's got a very, very quiet fan on it. And actually I have plugged this in on just a simple system and the fan is virtually silent. You can barely hear the thing turning. It is very good, although under a lot of load, anything over about 65%, it does ramp up a little bit, but still very much a quiet fan. On the bottom it goes about the input. So it's got AC input, 200 to 240 volts AC, and it goes into some of the voltages. So on the 12 volt rail, which is the one which is probably the most important to most of you, we're looking at 37 amps on the 12 volt rail, which to be honest with you is pretty much fine. You'll find a lot of the branded power supplies around the 450, 500 and 600 watt, roughly all come around about that sort of level, up to around about 40 amps on the 12 volt rail for that kind of money. It is rated as a 500 watt power supply, but you're getting 440 watts on that 12 volt rail. Connectivity wise, we've got a single 20+4 power connection for the ATX. We've also got a 12 volt 4+4 pin for your EPS power connection. You have a single PCI Express port, which is either 6 pin or 8 pin, which you can remove the 2 pins if you don't want to use it for a 8 pin. Also, you've got 2 PATA connections or Molex connections. So if you've got slightly older equipment, or maybe an RGB controller which needs a Molex connector, or maybe some of the fans on some of the budget cases these days, you've got 2 of those, and mostly they can be daisy chained, so you can plug maybe 4 or 5 fans onto one connector with no problems at all. Moving on to the SATA connectors, we've got 4 SATA connections, and these days again, these are becoming less and less useful as we're starting to move across to M.2 drives which don't require SATA. But if you've got, again, an RGB controller, or you've got some 2.5-inch drives, or maybe an old 3.5-inch drive that you need to connect up in that budget system, then you've got 4 connections in total. So that pretty much wraps up the tour of the box. Let's take a look inside. So first of all, we get a safety reminder, and basically that goes into information about obviously buying a power supply which is suitable for your system. Don't go buying this power supply if you're going to get like a Ryzen 9 and a 2080 Ti. That is not a suitable solution. But again, if you're using something like a Ryzen 5 3600 on a B450 motherboard with something like a 1650 Super, then this is going to be absolutely fine. But if you do want to find out what wattage your system actually needs and what its requirements are, you can go over to the links in the video description and check out your exact requirements. So what do we get in the box? We get a UK power plug. Yeah, the power supply itself. Now this one actually was a Amazon warehouse bargain, so it has been used and possibly installed in a system already, so do bear that in mind. And also the packaging was a little bit bashed up, so yeah, not the best. You do get though the 4 power supply screws for actually fixing it into your system, so that's pretty good. And that is essentially it for what you get inside the box. So looking at the power supply itself, it's actually a pretty nice looking unit. Relatively muted colour scheme, so most of it is in this kind of satin black finish. On the side you've got the Cylon branding and the strip on the side. There are some versions of this power supply which actually have an RGB option, so this can be illuminated. This isn't this particular model, but if you want to, you can spend a little bit more and get an RGB version. They also do tons of versions with higher wattages, etc. So you can check those out from the video description and also the affiliated links. So looking at the back, we've got a single on-off switch. We don't have any options here for switching voltage, etc. This is designed for the UK and EU markets. There's nice hexagonal mesh on the back for letting air out, which is really nice to see. On this side, nothing at all. So if you want a blank setup, then obviously you can turn the power supply one way or the other when you're fitting it. And these stickers, to be honest, do come off relatively easy. So if you don't want anything on the side, you can peel that off quite happily. On the bottom, we've got the fan here. So this is a 120mm fan. And also you've got this really nice mesh effect or slotted effect in there, which is a little bit different. I quite like the look of that. It's definitely a nice change rather than seeing like a mesh or some sort of wire grill pushed in there. Really nice to see. And you've got the Aerocool logo in the middle there. Like I said before, this fan is exceptionally quiet. Basically undetectable under normal loads. As things ramp up and it gets over 65% of the power rating of the power supply, then it will start ramping up accordingly. But again, even under full load, this is pretty much inaudible. On the top section, you've got another sticker with the Cylon 500w and the 80+ rating on there. Also, it goes into more detail about the actual power ratings as it was on the box. So if you want to, you can pause the video now and take a closer look at that. So with all that done, let's take a look at the actual cabling. Now the cabling, like I said before, is this kind of licorice flat black stuff. And I really like this, really easy for cable management and tons better than the ketchup and mustard stuff that we tend to get. So let's start from the beginning. So first of all, you've got the ATX Power, your main ATX Power. So this is a 20+4. So if you have an older system, you may be putting this in, you can just slide that off the end and it gives you a 20-pin connection. But I think most people probably end up using it as a 24. And that seems to be held in place quite nicely, so it's not going to slip off when you try and plug it into the socket. Those are actually kind of braided or flattened together to give you that nice kind of flattened look. So you can cable manage that to look really nice. Next up, we've got our EPS connector. So this is our 4 or 8-pin connector. Again, same deal, you can just slide them apart. So if you only need the 4, you can just plug in the 4. Or if you need both of them for your CPU or your motherboard, then you can slot them together and plug that in. I'll put some exact cable measurements in the video description or coming up on the side here so you can see exactly how long they are. Next one up is our graphics card connection. So this is your PCI Express graphics card. So again, 6-pin or 6+2. And that one doesn't slot in particularly well on the side, it just is kind of held in place on those little lugs, so you might have to be a little bit careful when you plug that in to make sure it goes in correctly. But it does give you the flexibility of using an older graphics card or maybe one that only supports a 6-pin connection. There is only one of these connectors, so if you're maybe rebuilding a particularly old system, like something like a bit of a retro system with an older AMD graphics card or NVIDIA graphics card, which requires 2 of these, then do look higher up the range. The higher range models do actually come with 2 connections rather than just the 1. Next up, we've got a hard drive connection. So these are actually laid out pretty well. So you've got 2 there. One has got a pair of SATA connectors and then a Molex on the end. Some people who don't like Molex may be tempted to trim that off the end, which you can do with a flat knife. Just trim it off, obviously make sure it's not connected or turned on. That would be a bad idea. But you can quite easily get a knife and slice down there. So if you don't want any Molex connectors, you can remove those quite easily. And actually with these kind of designs, I've done this before. If I've only needed 1 cable and I'm going for ultra clean look, then you can just slit them across, just run a knife across that edge there and it gives you a nice clean cut and also prevents you having extra cables to manage. Again, entirely up to you. You will obviously void your warranty or anything if you do that, but if you do want that ultra clean look, it is a possibility. And the last one is basically exactly the same. So again, we've got our 2 SATA connections, which are pretty close together. So if you've got maybe a rack of hard drives, then you can just bunch them together quite easily and cable manage that. Just flatten the cables down, put a cable tie around it, and you can keep things looking nice and neat. And again, you've got your Molex connector on the end. Now, some people would prefer probably to see the Molex connectors as a separate entity on their own, so you can just put them to one side and forget about them. But I think actually this gives you the ultimate in flexibility. Okay, so this has been the Aerocool Cylon 500w, 80 plus white rated for those 230 volt countries. Yeah, I'm actually pretty impressed. Like I said, I have briefly used this in a system and it is so quiet, it is excellent. You do get some of these power supplies on the cheaper end of the market, which are pretty noisy and use maybe a static speed fan, which just runs at 100% all the time. But this one does seem to ramp up and down quite nicely and still stay very, very quiet. So for budget builders, with the combination of its quietness, its really cheap price, and these really nice flat cables to aid with the cable management, I think this one's a winner. But again, let me know what you think in the comments section below. But in the meantime, I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.